What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of JaAR. JaAR, for those of you that may be new, stands for Joe
and Amy
Review. This is our weekly show where we review the Magic stories. And this week, we are here, finally, for the beginning, Chapter 1, in fact, of The Gathering Storm by Django Wexler.
Yes.
So these are the prequel stories for the Ravnica War of the Spark novel by Greg Weisman. They are finally here. We get to find out what was going on during Guilds of Ravnica and Ravnica Allegiance for the actual main characters of our story. And my quick review at the top of this for Chapter 1 is, thank God above that this story exists. Because we've been reviewing the parallel stories for Rat, written by Greg Weisman. We reviewed the novel by Greg Weisman in 3 parts. And coming in November, we have another novel by Greg Weisman that we are going to be reviewing. And I was slightly dreading that because I had been just so beaten down by the parallel stories, and while I enjoyed the novel, it wasn't the best, and we spent some time talking about that in our reviews, and it's felt to me like it had been ages and ages since we had a good story. So with that being said, despite the fact that I said this was a quick review, because this is me, and shouldn't you expect that by now, sorry, it was great. It was very good. It was a welcome change, and I highly recommend it. Amy, what about you?
I will say that this was a fun story. And it was so refreshing to be able to say the words, this is fun.
And you did say those words.
Because I can't remember the last story that I said that about.
Mm-hmm. That's fair.
I just can't.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, like...
Regardless of good stories, bad stories, stories I was indifferent about. Like, it's been a while since I've been able to say, that was a fun story. I think probably the last one that comes to mind is the Rakdos story.
I was going to say that one of the Guilds of Ravnica / Ravnica Allegiance ones had to have been up there, but yeah,
that's the Rakdos story, but I feel like before that, it was probably like the story where they were like underwater and they were doing the it was the teacher with the class.
That's the Simic story. Yes. Yeah. So the Simic story, the Rakdos story, I agree.
Yeah,
and
so that like bundle of stories are really the last ones that I was able to say anything like that about.
Right. Which wasn't that long ago, but at the same time it feels like it was that long ago. So no, I hear you.
We've read a lot of material in the interim.
Yeah, that's all. So, okay, so that means that you also recommend this one.
I absolutely recommend this one.
So, typically we put the link down in the description below so that you can go read the story and then come back and watch our review. You have to sign up for a newsletter or something. I'm not sponsored. We're not sponsored, so I don't know how to get that for you. It is on Twitter. I've seen it placed, but I'm sure if you search The Gathering Storm by Django Wexler, Django like Django Unchained, D-J-A-N-G-O, Wexler is W-E-X-L-E-R. I'm sure if you look that up online, you will be able to find a way to get these stories. And I recommend that you read them because, again, these chapters are short enough where they go into some pretty extensive detail. At least, obviously, I say these chapters. This is the first one that we have read, but they go into enough detail where us trying to summarize it, like, we could give you the broad strokes, but you're going to miss so much.
Right.
Because the quick summary is it was about Rahl and Niv-Mizzet and planning for Nicol Bolas and the end. Like, you know what I mean? Like, it's just...
that's the quick summary.
Right.
But it was great material.
Yeah.
Please go read it.
Yeah, and that's why I'm saying I don't want you to do a disservice to yourselves if you haven't had the chance to read it. It's probably more beneficial to go read it and then come back here because of how good it was. If it's bad, we can say it was bad, we're going to tell you why it was bad, and then if you want to read it after the fact, go for it, but...
If you have extra time or whatever.
Right. And you hate yourself, then you can go read a bad story, but this is a good one, so it's worth your time.
The other thing I would say about it is it read a lot faster than I expected. It looked like it was going to be long, but when you're in it, you're in it.
Right.
And so it goes quickly.
Right. I was kind of surprised when we got to the end. It was like, oh man, it was, not that it was just picking up, because it had picked up, I enjoyed it, but it was like, I could have kept going.
I definitely wanted more at the end. They picked a good sort of cliffhanger little end there. It was very fun, cute, and it definitely left you wanting more at the end of the story.
Yeah, I'll agree with that. So that's our quick review / summary / whatever at the top. Like I said, if you want to go read the story, definitely go do that, and then we would love for you to come back here, of course. But and if you've already read chapter 1, then welcome, stay, enjoy. So on to the full review itself. That opening section before the story was separated by lines delineating either change in perspective or passage of time, kind of horizontal lines across the page. Everything prior to that first horizontal line across the page was such a breath of fresh air. No pun intended, because there was a lot of like weather imagery and stuff in there, but it was so amazing to hear description and metaphor and simile and writing, like actual creative writing, as opposed to these are words that need to be given to you, and so here I'm giving them to you, but there's no soul, there's no substance to them. And again, who's to say what that means in terms of why the novel didn't do that, whether that's writing ability or space constraints or what have you, but
time constraints.
Right, but the description and the time, speaking of time, and the time that was given to describe the scenery by Django Wexler here was incredible.
Yeah, the language was beautiful. It had a flow to it as it was read. There was imagery. There was, all the literary devices that we used to talk about in these reviews that we haven't gotten to talk about in a long time.
Yeah.
Because they just haven't really been included in the material that we were reviewing. Yeah, so it was nice to see that stuff again, to just hear beautiful writing.
Yeah, and it's like I had said at the top, it's definitely a welcome change. Because, for example, I learned something, and I knew bits and pieces of this, but it was nice to hear it from you, Amy. Amy, could you talk about what clued you into being happy about something in the first section when referencing these sputtering oil lamps?
I liked when they talked about, they kind of mentioned that that certain people were kind of more affluent and certain people were not. And you could tell that because they were using, the lower quality lamp oil, and it was sputtering, and it just reminded me of, colonial times, or even pre-industrial revolution in Britain and things like that, where they used to use animal fat candles that would literally, they would stink and they were ugly and they and the lower quality fat you used, the blacker and thicker and more sort of harmful to breathe in the smoke was of those candles, and how the more affluent you were, the better quality candles you had, and that you hear a lot certain things that sort of affluent people had in those days to kind of show off that they were more affluent. And candles is not one of those things that most people think of.
Right.
So it was kind of like an interesting thing for me to learn when I originally learned it, and then hearing that line in this story really made me think of that moment of learning that, like, not all candles were even the same back then. You had like candles that were high quality and beautiful and burned evenly and didn't create all this horrible smoke that you had to breathe in, and then how the peasants were burning these like grotesque animal fat candles, you know, and it just like, and it's just it's real. It's really real.
Yeah. Well, and the cool thing that they did here was they showed the difference, because this isn't historical fiction, right?
Right.
And that's not to diminish anything that you just discussed, because it's drawing that comparison on purpose.
Right.
But what it did here was it brought you back to the fact that it's a fantasy world by saying that the ones that weren't sputtering were magically enhanced.
Yes.
So as opposed to like better fat or actual wax or what have you, like better made candles, they just referenced that they were magically made as opposed to poor oil usage and they were sputtering. So, but it still alludes to historical accuracies for here in the real world, but also is like, by the way, it's a fantasy story, so the better ones are done with magic. Right. And so, and that's a fine way to add that in. And so something that I wrote here.
And another way to kind of say, like, the people who are affluent in this world are the people who are good at magic.
Right, and more able to use it more freely in their day-to-day lives.
Right, which is sort of just a way, and it's a very short and seamless way to kind of put you in that mindset of the actual culture of the world that they're throwing you into.
Oh yeah.
And it was very flawless, very fast, very effortless, because you didn't realize it was happening. I mean, I thought of that history piece that most people, that doesn't occur to most people, right? But I think for the most part, it didn't take you out of the story to tell you that.
Nope.
And put you in that, it only helped drive you to that place that it was taking you.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. And it's funny that something that I wrote here about the first section, and this is a positive statement if that's not clear. I think this first section, again, prior to that first line delineating change in perspective, could have been almost from any story. I mean, it mentioned Rahl, but they could, any main character could be named Rahl. And this is a really nice introduction to a novel. You get the description of the setting. You know where you are. You have a little bit of a history with regard to the place, because they talk about, the world of the Golgari underneath, and the rain is so much that it's sputtering debris up through the gratings or what have you. So you get all of that imagery, that information, and sure, like, there may be discussion of Nicol Bolas in there, and so, but regardless, this is a nice way to start any story.
Right.
Because if this is the kind of stuff that you like, this imagery, these descriptions, these metaphors, it's just so well written that it in and of itself draws you in. And there's a concept, at least with movies, that you will hear some people say, where within the first 10 minutes of a movie, there needs to be some form of violence or a sexual encounter or something like that to grab the audience's attention and make them want to be in, or will make them invested in the movie, right? And that's a philosophy that some people have. And with this particular story, there was some action later on when Rahl meets up with Tezzeret, but in the beginning here, there was just nice imagery. You could kind of picture it in your mind of a camera zooming through the city and showing you all the rain coming down and what autumn looks like, and you see all the people huddled under the umbrellas or with their collars turned up and they're running through the streets and stuff. It's just very vivid imagery.
Well, you kind of took it to like a movie place, right? But when I heard you read those words, I was there. So I was walking through the streets.
Mm-hmm.
I was feeling the chill of the rain.
Mm-hmm.
Right? I was seeing the splashing from the grates and the gray skies and the autumn leaves. They didn't really talk about the autumn leaves in the description.
No, they just started it with it's autumn in Ravnica,
right,
so it's raining.
but I was able to picture all of the beautiful autumnal arts on all of the cards that I had seen.
Mm-hmm. Which we finally have some substance behind as well.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I agree. It was very nice. And it was, like I said, it was a very welcome thing to read and just be able to just sink into.
Yeah.
And know that, like, okay, I don't have to be on edge. I don't have to be angry while I'm reading this. Not have to be, but I'm not going to be angry reading this of how lazy it is, and we've heard it all before, and it's not really done well, or the characterization is going to be backwards for each and every character. Like, no.
Right. You didn't have to sit there in a critical mindset.
Yeah. You just sit back, enjoy, and occasionally I got to write these notes down about things that worked for me.
You just...
that I wanted to talk to you all about.
You just were in it.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. So then we get to that line delineating passage of time. We get to the next passage, and now it's, or not passage of time, this time it was a change in perspective, because we get to the Dimir kite sailor, if you will, flying into Nivix. And we get the description of Nivix, which again, super vivid. I felt like I could see that, like Amy said, I felt like I could see the place myself. For me, as a new DM myself for Dungeons & Dragons, and an owner of the Guildmaster's Guide to Ravnica book, this description is amazing if you ever want to run a portion of your D&D adventure into Nivix at any point.
That's an amazing idea.
Right? But it talks about where all the guards and sentries are. It talks about what kinds of traps are there, but the fact that they can also be kind of navigated through in some way. I mean, the kite sailor was able to get all the way up to Niv Mizzet and then start to leave, and then, you know, the intruder in the kite sailor's mind kind of stranded her there, but which I'm gonna go ahead and say was Nicol Bolas. I hope that that's not too bold of me to say, but yeah, that was what I thought of instantly. I was like, oh, okay, because I know in the book they have in the Guildmaster's Guide to Ravnica they have some maps and things like that for different guilds and different areas of different guilds. I'm not sure if Nivix is one of them, and maybe this description here is also in that book. I have not read it cover to cover yet, although I have been enjoying reading it sporadically. But this was really nice, and it did, like I said, it did kind of perk up my DM ears of like, oh, so this could be like a thing. Like if you spent some time reading through this from this chapter and going and referencing the book as well, you could probably make a really, really interesting infiltration of Nivix all the way up to Niv Mizzet. And if any of you do end up doing that, let us know, because that sounds amazing.
Oh.
Amazing. Yeah, and I wrote it like it gave descriptions of how the stealing happened and what the wards and traps were like and what they looked like, but as well as the one trap that did end up getting sprung, we know what it looked like. It was very Azorius in that it was like a detention sphere popped up, grabbed the person, and then, as we saw later, kind of brought them underground, and then Niv kind of brought them back up again to like reference them, but they were stunned in there. So that was really, really cool. Something else that I wrote for you, Amy, was you mentioned one of the first times that you mentioned enjoyment with this story. Not to say that you didn't enjoy it in the beginning, but one of the times that you like verbally commented on how cool it was or whatever was when Tezzeret and Ral are talking to each other.
Yeah. Well, and the other part is Ral talking to Niv Mizzet. So I just liked the character, the dynamic between Ral and Tezzeret, or between Rawl and Niv Mizzet.
Yeah.
They were well written, they were fun, they were real.
It's almost like they were properly characterized.
Yeah.
What a concept.
Yeah, yeah.
Because they were given time. Now, let me ask you a question. Because we're not going to do this too much, but if it comes up, it comes up. The conversations between Rawl and Niv Mizzet, between Rawl and Tezzeret, were they better than almost every dialogue exchange in the novel?
Yes.
Like almost every one.
And here's why. They felt, I said they were real. They felt like real conversations that people actually have.
Correct. As opposed
to
excuse me.
Facts written on a page that simply have quotation marks around them.
Yeah.
And say a character's name.
Yeah.
Okay?
Yep.
It's just good writing.
Right. For example, when Rawl is talking to Niv Mizzet mentions about the Guild Pact and needing to change over the Guild Pact or whatever. They're discussing the Guild Pact in general. Excuse me. And Rawl thinks to himself about the fact, thinks about the fact that he was involved in that debacle.
Yeah.
And thinks about his part in it. Now, at that point, he doesn't say out loud, well, Niv Mizzet, you know that I was the one that ran the maze instead of your carefully constructed character there that you created. And so blah, 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 blah. Because
so obviously it's my fault that this is the problem right now.
Or I now feel guilty about that, and you have to keep rubbing it in. Because the only point that serves is to tell us what's going on.
Right.
If I want to know what's going on with that, I'll go look it up. Because I don't need you to tell me that in this story. You brush up against it. You let people go online. Go on the MTG Vorthos Reddit, for example, and ask the question. Whatever you need to do, go on the wiki, find the actual story and read it, the older story. And again, ask where that story might be found so that you can read it for yourself. But I don't need this story to take time out of what it's doing, which is perfectly characterizing the character, or very nicely characterizing the characters. I don't want to, people may disagree with the characterization. I didn't, but that doesn't mean I get to call it perfect.
Right.
But very good characterization of the characters, good, actual, real-seeming dialogue between the two, whether it is Rawl and Tezzeret or Rawl and Niv Mizzet. And yet still accomplishing tasks of teaching us things, getting us through the story points, and getting us to where we're going to need to be. We still learned a ton of things, but it was Niv Mizzet explaining things to Rawl Zarek that Rawl didn't know up until that point. Right. And then Rawl, even in his own mind, calculating through, being like, wow, Niv Mizzet just gave plans for the Planeswalker Beacon that were based on the things that I was doing with the Project Lightning Bug, which he wasn't supposed to know anything about. That stings. And it's like, yeah, you would be thinking that in that exact moment, because that is the realization, that is the moment that you come to the realization of the fact that Project Lightning Bug was not as secret as you wanted it to be.
Right.
But if it were...
Which oughta also make you think, like, who else might know something about this that wasn't supposed to.
Right. And then we get to the novels where friggin' everybody learns about it and it's not a huge deal.
Right. Just randomly.
Whatever. That's really neither here nor there. Like, Lavinia knows about it, Rat knows about it, like, who cares, right? Vorel, I'm sure, Vorel definitely finds out about it. I would say at this point the whole of Ravnica probably knows about it just because of the whole Elder Spell being a thing and all the Planeswalker Sparks being ripped out and flying up to Bolas. Like, I'm sure people are going to have some questions. But that's, again, neither here nor there. Last two things. Having read the novel, it is hard to tell whether or not we would have known at the time what the memory was that was planted in Niv Mizzet's head by the kite sailor, by the intruder inside of the kite sailor's head, whatever you want to say.
Right.
It's hard to say whether we would have known when it happened in this story that oh, well, that must be the memory or the thought that was planted in his head, and now he's giving it to Ral and making Ral do it, and it's an add-on. We know that it is because we learned about it in the novel, so it's impossible to say, actually, whether or not that is the case. But that's something that I thought of with regard to that reveal from the novel, is that if you had read it in the novel, if you think about it, I mean, this is chapter 1 of 20 of The Gathering Storm, which is the prequel novel. So if you read the prequel stories first, all the way through, or the prequel novel first, all the way through, chapters 1 through 20, and then read the Greg Weisman novel, I assume that the reveal of the Planeswalker Beacon being a plant from Nicol Bolas into Niv Mizzet's mind would probably be a huge reveal.
Right.
And I'm upset that that opportunity was robbed from me a little bit. Because a lot of the other things from this story in particular, there weren't many other surprises that I feel like the novel was supposed to have been hinting at with regard to referencing back to these. I'm sure we're going to get a lot more of them.
Yeah, hopefully.
But we read them out of order, so
Right.
This is the first time that something that would have been properly built towards was kind of neutered by the fact that we read the novel first.
Right.
So that's just something that I noticed here, is that the thought was planted in Niv's head. Towards the end of the story, Niv gives the Planeswalker Beacon concept to Ral, and you're going, oh, so immediately he has this thought and moved forward with it and gave it to Ral, whereas in the novel would have been, if we had read this one first, where we would have learned, holy crap, the entire concept of the Planeswalker Beacon is what was implanted in Niv's brain and was part of Nicol Bolas's plan all along.
Wow.
Right, and again, like I said, I don't know, because we didn't get the opportunity.
Right.
I'd be curious to know if past me, right, or alternate reality me who read these in the proper order would have seen that and would have guessed that was the thought planted in Niv Mizzet's head by this kite sailor, because again, it's Chekhov's gun.
Right.
They mention the thought planting in Act 1, right in the beginning, and that gun needs to go off in Act 3, which in this case it did, but it would also be the gun in the novel going off. So you would wait through the entirety of the prequel story, then get into the novel, and then when they reveal it in the novel, that would be your gun going off that was planted in chapter 1 of the prequel stories, which I think is cooler. I think that concept of referencing back to something that happened seemingly so long ago rewards people for having the memory or having read it, I guess, soon enough back to back that they remember those details enough to say, wow, it was Niv Mizzet because it was that Dimir kite sailor that planted it into Niv's brain. I remember that.
Right.
So that was a little bit diminished here, unfortunately. Still very well written. Obviously, it takes nothing away from my enjoyment of this story, but it was just that moment of like, oh, damn. We missed an opportunity there. That's
Right.
all. And last but not least, unless you have anything more,
No, I don't think so.
last but not least, we get the information that we are going to, Ral is going to the Azorius next. Because he was given the task of gathering all 10 guilds together, as he put it, 10 mortal enemies have to all come together. And obviously, spoilers, it doesn't work. Like, we know it doesn't work. We know this already. So it doesn't work, but he's going to the Azorius next. That's the kind of cliffhanger, if you will, moment that Amy was talking about, where it brings you into, hey, I'm going to go to the Azorius next. And the quote was that you really enjoyed, and I liked as well.
I liked that whole that whole bit
of him talking about
where he said that he's used to doing the impossible.
Oh yeah.
That's been his life.
Yeah.
and that, how do you do the impossible?
How do you
just start with step one?
Well, it said, the quote is, how do you get started arraigning an impossible meeting? You start with the people that love meetings.
Yeah, I was trying to say, I liked a larger portion of it.
Oh, I see.
So
I'm sorry, I misunderstood.
Where he was like, I'm used to doing the impossible. How do you do an impossible thing? You just start with step one, and then you just keep going.
That's
right?
fair. Yeah.
And that's something that I personally have a lot of trouble with.
Mm-hmm.
I get very overwhelmed with things that I feel are complicated or things that I think won't work.
Right.
Because I see the big picture, or I see the end result,
Right.
and feel like I'm never going to be able to get there.
Yeah.
Instead of just starting with whatever I can do at the time, and then try to just keep moving forward from that point. So that's like a personal thing of mine that is a struggle for me. So I liked how neatly they kind of tied that bow and put that into like one simple sentence. Like, oh, this is the obvious way to just do this impossible thing.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, oh, right, no, I mean, yeah, but okay. And then he just goes on to then have that specific quote to say, like, which is possibly my favorite part of this whole story.
Yeah.
To say, like, how do you get started arranging an impossible meeting? And then you start with the people that love meetings. And that's hilarious to me, because the meeting is a meeting that that everyone who would need to be part of the meeting would absolutely 100% hate having the meeting.
Yep.
Right? So if I were Rawl in that situation, it wouldn't occur to me, oh, let's go talk to the Azorius, because clearly the Azorius love meetings. That wouldn't occur to me, because even if the Azorius love meetings, they love meetings that they want to go to. They don't love meetings that they really don't want to go to.
and speaking as an Azorius myself, I would assume not only do they enjoy meetings that they want to go to, but it would be meetings that they are controlling, or at least are following particular bylaws or rules of how meetings are supposed to go, and things like that.
At the very least,
Protocol.
Right, or at the very least, helping to sort of enact other protocols that maybe they weren't using before.
Right.
Because developments have been made to make them realize that the processes they were using before need to change, or something like that. Mm-hmm. Something very productive and sort of progressive, or proactive,
Mm-hmm.
That's the kind of things that they would really want to take part in, which this really is not. It's just another way for the guild leaders to sort of be controlled by another person that they don't want to be controlled by, especially the Azorius, because the Azorius, I feel, although they are not supposed to have more power than the other guilds, they do.
Well, especially once Dovin comes in and starts taking it for himself, which, again, I'm sure we will be seeing in the future, maybe even as soon as next week. Who knows? Right. So, that being said, the way that we're doing this is almost certainly we're going to do these week by week, chapter by chapter. We just did chapter 1. Next week will only be chapter 2. If for some reason there's a chapter that's criminally short, maybe we'll do two in 1 week. But we do have, out of 20 chapters here, we have 18 weeks between now and when the sequel novel comes out, War of the Spark Forsaken by Greg Weisman. So we've got time until then. who's to say if more stories are coming out between now and then, because God knows I don't get any information, and I'm sure nobody else does either. So,
Right.
so if that happens, we will roll with the punches and do what we have to do. But for now, our plan is to go through these chapters week by week, because this is great.
Yeah.
This was a welcome treat after what we've gone through the past 7 weeks, I think it was. No, maybe even 9 to 10 weeks of reviewing the other stories. So this is nice to be back to positive JaAR. I don't have to be mad. I don't have to yell about lazy writing. This was great, and I really, really hope that you all enjoyed it as well. Now, that being said, you are welcome to disagree with our assessment as well, because if you do, we would love to hear from you. We would love to hear contrary opinions as well as similar opinions. Did you think that we didn't give this enough praise? Did we not talk enough about particular aspects of the story? Any of those thoughts, any contrary thoughts where you didn't think this was a good story, maybe you liked Greg Weisman's stories better, I'm very curious to hear from people that feel that way, because that I can't see at all, and I would love to hear your thoughts and your comments. And all of those things, I keep saying I know you would as well. That's just how it works. If we agree on something, we always are curious to hear contrary opinions,
Right.
because it's something that we don't have much of a frame of reference for, because
Right.
we clearly aren't thinking that way. So definitely please provide us those. That's what the comment section down below is for, and we would love to hear from you all. And that would be kind of a good way to show off something, Amy. What is that?
Hashtag Vorthos Pride.
That's right, because we're back and it's positive again. So yes, definitely show off your hashtag Vorthos Pride
Yes.
in the comments down below.
Have pride now.
Yeah.
You can.
Exactly. We're back. We're back into it. It's fun. Hopefully you've been getting these. I know, again, signing up for the newsletter is a thing that you may not have necessarily
Yeah.
wanted to do.
Yeah.
To be honest, I can say that I don't feel like I've been spammed. I mean, I'm getting one email a week. I'm reading the text in the email, which is the story or the chapter, and then that's it. Although if you want to pre-order War of the Spark Forsaken, those links are there. If you want to get War of the Spark Ravnica, that link is there as well. So it's not the end of the world in terms of those things, and I'm sure as the weeks go on, hopefully there's more information in there besides just those same 2 links to those 2 novels over and over and over again. Maybe it'll be more than just that. Who knows? But for now, this is where we are. This is where we're going to close this particular episode of JaAR. Thank you all so very much for watching.
Yeah.
We really hope that you enjoyed. And again, you can give your opinions in the comments, thoughts on the show overall, the episode, the story, more importantly, of course, because that's what we're here reviewing.
Right.
Any and all thoughts that you might have, that's what the comment section is for. You can also check us out on Facebook and Twitter. Those links are down in the description box below. I feel like I do not talk about that enough.
Right.
If you missed it this past week, this was a whirlwind week for us last week. We had a preview stream that is now up on the channel, the VOD of that, many hours long, but feel free to jump around because it was a blast doing
Yes.
Core Set 2020 Sealed.
Yes.
Then I was on a stream with our good friend Dave. That's twitch.tv/DAM314.
Yes.
So you should definitely go check him out. Again, that's also in the VOD. We had a ton of fun. We've been playing through Spider-Man on the PS4. His community is hilarious and amazing, and he does a great job of cultivating that community. And we are always welcome, or always happy to be welcomed to be a part of that. And this time it was again, it was me playing through some more of Spider-Man and arguing with Dave on the merits of Spider-Man versus J. Jonah Jameson and Norman Osborn, because that's what we do. And then on Friday, we were at pre-release at our sponsor store, and we got to open 4 full kits. So you can definitely check that out. We got some sweet stuff in those kits, I assure you. There's technically 1 code that I gave away in there, but I don't know when they become valid. So if you haven't seen the video yet and you want a code, I assure you there are a lot more codes to come, so don't you worry. Even though they only get you 6 packs and it's 1 per account, it is a thing. And so if it's something that you want, please feel free. We will have plenty of them to give out and to go around. So the way that you can see those, when it pops up, our logo will be right here. If you click or tap on that logo, you can subscribe. Then there's a notification bell that you can click, and you can click a check mark, and you'll get emails when our videos come out. And as soon as you see a video, specifically an opening, come out, you might want to go check it out. Because if it's got a code in it, and you want to get that code, you might want to jump on and check that video out as soon as possible. If you don't get it in the first one, don't worry. Like I said, we've got a lot of them. So don't worry, you will have multiple opportunities, and if there are a certain number of people who are quick on the uptake, they will get that one code, and that's the only one they can use on their account. So then they'll be locked out of using them in the future. Right. So you'll have a chance the second time, or the third time, or the fourth, or what have you. So
right. So also for your own reference, be aware that if you got a code, that you do not need to keep trying to re-up this code.
Yes, and that includes if you went to your own pre-release, that is where the codes are coming from, is from the pre-release kit. So if you used a code from the kit, the ones that we give away will not help you.
Right, so don't waste your time.
Right.
Trying to put it in or whatever. And then say, it doesn't work,
no. You know. You should watch the video and enjoy, because we're probably going to open some sick stuff. Yes. But yeah, that's all for that. So definitely stay tuned to the channel, subscribe. Some of the videos that I was talking about will probably be popping up, maybe even over my face here.
Yes.
Amy's happy about that.
Better.
It won't be over her face. It'll be above her head. I'm taller than she is. So anyway, thank you all so very much for watching.
One time, it's a good thing.
That you're shorter than me? Yeah, that's true. Or when you get to ask me to get things off of high shelves for you. That's probably
Why would I want that?
Because then I get to do things. I don't know. Anyway, thank you all so very much for watching this episode of JaAR here on Geek for All. I have been Joe.
And I'm Amy.
And as we always say, in whichever video of ours you watch next, we will see you all next time. Thanks, everybody.